So some of you guys might have heard this talk before, but for those that haven't, oh my lord. Today we're going to be talking about connecting our careers and our future to Providence. Now, some of you guys might be really young and maybe you're not actually really thinking about that at this point, but eventually you're going to have to answer the age-old question, what major am I going to choose in college? What career, what job am I going to do? So today I'm going to be bringing you along my personal journey of figuring out how I chose my own career path in a way that I felt connected to God. So what exactly is the career path that I chose? What do you guys think it is?
I'm a marine biologist.
Pretty close. It's aquaculture. So to define that, it's breeding or rearing of aquatic animals in a controlled environment, for example, fish farming. So essentially, I take care of fish. So in a way, kind of like marine biology, but fish specifically, and for farming purposes. So many of you guys might be wondering, fish farming, what does that have to do with God? That doesn't fit in a sentence with God, right? What does that have to do with Providence? Well, it's okay that you guys are questioning that, because when I had been wondering what career I wanted to choose, this wasn't even on my mind at that point. Fish wasn't even in my brain at that point, right? And the reason why I didn't know what I wanted to do in the future was because I did not understand God's providence as a whole. I didn't understand what it is that God wanted from me. And because of that, I was confused. And to kind of showcase that through a diagram, right? Our movement has a lot of short-term providential goals. So, for example, things like Vision 2020, Vision 2027, or various like Peace Starts With Me events, or Chunshimon events, right? These events that happen within the course of a few months or a few years, these are all short-term providential goals. But because these short-term providential goals are so clear, it allows for me and a lot of other people to create their own personal short-term goals. For example, I want to witness to this amount of people, right? We're able to think of those goals because we know the providential short-term goals. However, when it comes to things like family life, public mission, career, basically future long-term goal things that happen decades and decades in the future, it's harder to understand what exactly, how exactly do we connect that to Providence, right? We know the end destination is world peace. However, there's something missing in the middle that connects these short-term events, short-term goals to world peace, and that is the long-term goals. So I realized that if I could clarify for myself what the movement's long-term goals are, then I could have a clear idea of what my personal goals, like career, could be, so that it would actually fit into this larger picture and connect my future with the future that God wants. So this is a quote from True Father's autobiography that relates to this, right? True Father says, "I have lived my life with just one thought. I want to bring about a world of peace." And then he says, "What I want is to wipe away completely the walls and fences that divide the world in myriad ways, and to create a world of unity." So he makes it very clear cut. What do you think the goal of our movement is, guys? Anyone? Yes, world peace and unification. That is the way that we will liberate God's heart, right? So that's the goals of our movement. Now, when I was maybe some of your guys' age, when I was in high school, the only way I thought I was able to help achieve world peace was through witnessing, through the word. So for example, telling my friends about the divine principle, for example, right? But I realized, at that point, I was really young, I was really naive, and I didn't understand the weight of all these problems, all these issues in the world. For example, starvation, war, environmental issues. Back then, I didn't know, I was very optimistic and world peace, right? And I had that kind of attitude when I was, witnessing to my friends through the word. So I would talk to them about the divine principle, and I would talk to them about these Peace Starts With Me rallies. However, every time I did, they would just laugh at me in my face. Now, why is that? Well, eventually, after I talked to them, I found out the reason why they couldn't even believe in the idea of world peace being possible is because they've personally experienced these terrible issues firsthand. And I still remember one thing that my friend had told me in response to me asking them if they wanted to come to the Peace Starts With Me rally. And that was this: She said, I moved here from a country where we had bomb drills. Sometimes we would actually hear bombs in the distance. Pretty heavy, right? So it's at this point that I came to realize that achieving world peace, solving all these insanely heavy issues is really difficult. And I began to question, is witnessing through the word actually enough to solve these problems? What do you guys think? Okay. Thank you for the answer. Anyway, I also thought that, right? I also had that doubt in my mind, right? And during this time of doubting witnessing, my grandfather had actually passed on to the spirit world. And my grandfather, Tateo Sato, great man by the way, he was one of the leaders of Ocean Providence. And it was when he ascended, when he went to the spirit world, I basically became interested. What about Ocean Providence was it that had him working himself to the bone even when he only had a few days left to live in the hospital? Right? What was it about Ocean Providence that kept him driven to keep going until he went to the spirit world? And so I learned about Ocean Providence. I began learning about Ocean Providence, and one of the first things I noticed was, wow, true parents went fishing a lot. And these are just some photos, but there are so many photos out there of true parents out on the boat, out fishing. But as I dug deeper into Ocean Providence, I realized that Ocean Providence is not just about fishing, but it's really a providence. It's a movement. It's a collection of efforts, of organizations, of businesses, of different people working toward achieving world peace and unification through the ocean. And then I came across this quote from True Father. He says, I am the founder of this gigantic spiritual movement, but I am also laying the foundation to solve future physical problems of the world. Since I'm so enthusiastic and have so many plans about the ocean, anyone who comes to the Unification Church cannot help but pay attention to the ocean. And so what is he saying here, basically? Essentially what he's saying is that our movement is both spiritual and physical, right? Who here has read the Divine Principle? All right. Good amount of hands. There's something called dual characteristics, right? And there's internal and external for everything. So, anyway, so our movement also has both spiritual and physical aspects to it. And so what is Ocean Providence? Ocean Providence is the external counterpart to the ideological providence, the internal providence of things like blessing, of witnessing through the word. And through the unity between these two, through interconnecting these two, we would then be able to solve internal issues as well as external issues. Basically, solve every single issue in the entire world. And so I realized that, is witnessing enough to solve the problems of the world? Well, witnessing through the word and through action, through internal and external, then we would be able to solve the problems of the world. So it's not just through witnessing through the word, but also through physical action, the unity between these two movements. And so why is this relevant to career? Well, it's relevant because initially when I wondered what career path I should choose, I only thought spiritual providence was a thing. So I thought, maybe I have to become a pastor to help the world, right? We love you pastors, by the way. Right? Maybe I need to become a pastor. Maybe I need to become a pro #1 witnesser, right? But was that the only way for us to connect to providence? No, right? Once I came to understand that there is also an external aspect to providence, I realized that I could connect a physical career to this physical providence. And another thing that I realized that what providence constituted is solving all external and internal issues. Basically, solving any issue in the world is providence. So the question becomes, what exactly are these issues? Well, True Father lays it down very clearly for us, thankfully. He says, I want to tear down the walls between religions and between races and between the rich and the poor. And through that, we can reestablish the world of peace. And so what he's saying, he's breaking it down very clearly, right? To reestablish the world of peace, we need to unite religions, unite all people, and resolve poverty and hunger and create equalization. So it's through these three things that we would be able to clearly achieve world peace. So great, at this point, very clear, right? If we want to connect our future careers to providence, that means that we just need to choose one of these problems to solve, and then find a career path that can solve it. But then there's another issue, right? There's so many issues, right? All these issues are so big, so huge. So how do we choose which one to focus on? So it's at this point in high school, senior year, where I'm choosing my major for the college that I was accepted to. And I was like, oh my gosh, there are so many problems in the world. How am I supposed to choose which one to solve? How am I supposed to choose a career to follow? And so, at this point I was like, okay, I'm being really indecisive. I need to choose some random placeholder major and ask God to guide me, redirect me to the right path if it's the wrong one. So trusting in God, hoping that God would actually guide me to the right path, I chose a random placeholder major and then decided to go to Paraguay. Wow, Paraguay? Why Paraguay? Why do you guys think Paraguay? Close, yeah, actually, very close. So the reason why I went to Paraguay instead of going to any other gap year program that our movement provided was because at this point what I felt I wanted to understand was more about this physical providence, was about this ocean providence, because I felt understanding this would allow me to come to better understand what career I should choose. And so I went to Paraguay with this question, with this heart. Asking God, what career is it that the world needs me to pursue? And so I went to not LETA, but Aquamundo SA, which is a boat factory in Asuncion, Paraguay, the capital, which was established by my grandfather under True Parents Order. And it's one of the few remaining Ocean Providence businesses that continue today. Now, I learned a lot regarding boats because it's a boat factory, right? But one of the other huge things that I learned was True Parents Providence. Their words, right? 75% of my time there was spent on tparents.org. Who here knows about tparents.org? Okay, good amount of hands. It's essentially a website where you can read all of True Parents' speeches. It's crazy. But anyway, I read so many of True Parents' words, and my time in Paraguay was essentially a time of studying providence. And through that time of study, I learned multiple things. And two things I'm going to share with you today actually helped me choose my career path. So first is the goal of Ocean Providence. Now, Ocean Providence is the external providence, so its goal probably has something to do with solving external issues, right? So out of these three, unity of religions, unity of all people, and resolution of poverty and hunger and equalization, which do you think is the physical providence?
The middle one.
Yes, I heard middle one, that is correct. So Ocean Providence deals with this middle one, right? So fill in the gap between the rich and the poor. Great. But what does that mean? Are we filling the gap with pennies, coins, dollar bills? No, right? So to better understand this, I continue to read more about True Parents' words. And True Father makes it very clear what this actually means. He says, true peace will not come as long as humanity does not solve the problem of hunger. If the person next to me is about to die of hunger, peace is a mere luxury. When I look at the world situation, I feel that securing sufficient food supplies is the most pressing problem. Solving the food crisis cannot be put off for even a moment. So what's he saying here? What's he saying is the key issue? Hunger. Yes, hunger. Hunger is the key issue, but why? Why does he say that? Do you think he's correct? Well, let's see, right? From a artistic standpoint, right? From a artistic parental standpoint, from God's perspective, the utmost first thing that a parent thinks of when their child comes home from a long day is, has my child eaten yet? Do I need to feed them, right? True Mother is also really famous. Every time there's an event, she, tells the members after the big event, she's like, hey, I've prepared some food for you. Please enjoy the meal, right? A parent wants to feed their children, and so God and True Parents, who are the parents of humankind, naturally want to feed all of their children. Now that's from a artistic point of view, but for our logic bros out there, from a logical point of view, the hunger issue, when you study it, when you study the hunger issue and all the other physical issues of the world, you come to realize that the hunger issue is deeply rooted in all other physical issues. Now, those of you who were here last week, my sister did talk about this, but there are many who weren't here, so I'm going to be talking about it again. Essentially, the hunger issue, starvation, makes worse all other physical issues. It is the root of all, it is not the root, but it's the key core problem issue of all the other external issues. And so when we think of malnutrition, right, if a person grows up hungry all the time, that means they go through something called stunting, which means they become mentally and physically incapable of keeping a job. What does this mean if they can't keep a job? What are you not making if you don't have a job? Money. So what does that mean? You stay poor, right? So essentially, hunger keeps people in poverty. Not only that, but malnutrition and nutritional issues are super tied to health issues. Not only that, but environmental issues are abundant because of unsustainable food production, right? And this continues to happen because of the rising human population. And when environmental issues continue to worsen, climate events cause refugees to increase. And when refugees increase, that means there's more tension across borders, especially in the third world underdeveloped countries. What does this mean? This means conflict. This means war. And so a lot of governments, when a war happens, they tend to focus on war efforts rather than the well-being of their citizens. So this means that a lot of people in the third world countries who are in these conflict-ridden areas are the only choice for them to actually be able to make money and to feed their family and their children is to become a soldier in the front, even if they don't want to, right? So hunger essentially contributes to the amount of people involved in war and conflict. And so through this, you understand True Father's point, right? Hunger really is a key issue among these physical issues. It's tied to all of them. And so we come to understand, we can conclude, right, that Ocean Providence, the province to solve external issues, the long-term goal must be to
solve world hunger.
Amen. It's to solve the hunger problem and to feed God's children. And so, yay, now it's a lot clearer, right? Now I know that God wants me to do something with regards to the hunger problem. But the issue is that there is no single career that is called hunger issue solver, right? I can't just sign up for a major called, let's solve world hunger, So now the question becomes, what exactly can I do to actually tackle this huge and complex issue? Well, the answer to this comes from the original plan for Ocean Providence that True Parents had devised for us. Now, and therefore the original plan to solve the hunger issue and all other external issues, therefore. So at this point you might be wondering, right, this providence for the external issues and hunger, what does Ocean have to do with anything? Well, understanding this plan helps you understand this point. And True Father actually explains this plan very clearly in one of his speeches called The Development of the Oceanic Realm. And this speech was also what helped me choose aquaculture as my career path. So to summarize very briefly through visual diagrams what this plan was, so the first part of the plan is this, right? As people in places like the United States of America, right, developed countries, developed nations, members were meant to develop marine resources. And through developing marine resources, we would then, produce food, produce money, and then enter things like the boat industry. And by entering the boat industry, we can go into the transportation industry. And once we get into the transportation industry, we can go into the distribution industry. Then, once we're able to do that, we're able to create a distribution network across the globe. Why? Because we have a family federation network of blessed families across the world. And so we are able to connect our developed nations people to the developing countries. And we're able to go to those communities through large transport ships to ports and smaller boats through the rivers and streams. And through that, we're able to reach everyone and provide food and resources and money to the people that need it. So this is essentially, this part of the plan is to create this huge distribution network that's constantly providing food to the areas and the people that are hungry and need it. Now, is this the end of it, right? Does this actually solve world hunger? Just giving food to people? What do you think?
No.
No, right? There's the saying, give a man a fish for a day. Oh, give a man a fish and he's fed for a day. But teach a man to fish and he's fed for a lifetime. Now, true parents, do you guys think they're smart?
Yes.
Yeah, pretty smart, right? So obviously they knew this. So they knew that a part of the plan had to involve something to do with teaching. And this is where training comes in, training the young members. So you guys have heard of training, right? It's a huge thing in our movement. You know, through things like Next Gen missions, and what was once GPA, STF, right? All these things are meant to train us to become internally capable, people who understand God's word, true parents' word, and ideology, right? However, there's another aspect to this. True parents also wanted us to be able to solve external problems, to become capable people who could solve all these external issues as well. And that's through things like professions, like careers. Now, why is there a boat in the middle of the slide? It's because ocean training was one of the ways that true parents wanted us to train both internally and externally. We mentioned it a little bit last week, but being on the boat, being on the ocean, relating with the ocean and with water actually helps build character. It creates confidence, it creates an ability to unite with people, it creates a heart for creation and for others. And not only that, but it also teaches you really useful skills, right? If you guys came last week, you learned some cool knot tricks, you learned some nautical terms, right? And the reason why this is important is because when you go to third world countries and when you go to places where people need help, knowing these things is really useful, right? These practical skills. And so ocean training is one of the key ways that true parents want us to start training both internally and externally. So to summarize, basically, developing countries, us, right, in the United States, we basically become trained, capable professionals who also understand God's providence, God's heart, and God's ideology, right? And by becoming trained professionals in whatever profession, we are able to go out, cross the oceans to other countries and help these countries, developing regions, developing communities, become sustainable and flourishing by themselves, while also teaching them about true parents. And all that with the boat. But yeah, so then the question becomes, right, what profession do we need to create a sustainable community? What profession actually helps solve problems in underdeveloped nations? List out some professions, guys. Doctor. A politician. Lawyer, engineer, fish farmer, teachers, psychologists, anyone, right?
Pastor.
Yes, pastor. We do need pastor. Absolutely. Right, so any career path, anyone with the heart to want to help solve the issues of the world is able to become a key person in Providence. And so I asked myself, again, right, and this is in Paraguay, what is it, God, that Providence needs me to do? What career path should I choose? And it's at this point in Paraguay where I actually had a dream. Now, in this dream, True Father was on a boat. Very cool, chillax on the boat. It was a very nice day. And he says this movement needs more marine biologists. Oh, wow, okay. I wake up immediately and go to my school's portal and change my major to marine science. And so I changed my major, and so now I know what education I wanted to pursue. But the question becomes, what am I going to do with that education? What career path within that scope am I going to choose? And I chose aquaculture. And why is it? It's because I studied True Parents' words, True Parents' Providence, and among those words, aquaculture, fish farms. It's one of the things that I read. And so I felt like, okay, this is a key part of the plan, and so I want to become involved with it. And when I began to study more about aquaculture itself, I actually saw that yes, aquaculture can help solve things like the hunger issue and also the environmental issue. Aquaculture is one of the professions that can indeed help some of the issues of the world today. And so if we go back to this graph, now I knew what the long-term providential goals are What is it? Do you guys remember what the long-term goals are for Ocean Providence? Yes, I heard solving world hunger and therefore all other physical issues. And through that, through understanding this goal and through understanding the providence and the plan that your parents had, I was able to model my own personal long-term goals and future after that. And that is to gain the skills and knowledge in aquaculture that I would need so that I could go out to third world countries, to developing nations, to help locals create their own sustainable farms that will feed their communities, develop their economy, and help their environment flourish. And so does it make sense how aquaculture, how fish farming relate to Providence?
Yes.
Fire. Now, one thing I want to note before I finish, right, is that yes, I did have a really cool dream, but for those of you guys who don't get cool dreams, don't worry, God is still there with you, right? The dream didn't actually provide the answer to me, right? The dream was just a nudge in the right direction. In reality, what actually provided the answer to what career path I needed to choose was me studying True Parents' words, me studying Providence, me studying about the issues of the world. And so when it comes time for you guys to actually, face this big old question, what career should I do? What do I want to be when I grow up? I want you guys to ask yourselves, what problems are there in the world today that I want to be able to solve? What problems are there in the world today that God and people need solved? And after that, study, right? Don't just wait for God to write something in the clouds for you. Look for the answer in the books. Look for the answer in the world around you. And once you understand Providence, once you understand God and True Parents and their life course, then you are able to model your own personal life course after that. And so leaving you guys with a couple more quotes. I'm sorry, I know it's long, bear with me. True Mother says, as you enjoy the natural surroundings, please think of the environment in your countries and reflect on what field you need to study in order to become leaders that can make your countries beautiful. So she's telling us, right? Find something to study that you think will help solve issues in the world that will make it more beautiful. And another thing she says is that at the same time, we must go forward in building a new order on earth. Please never forget True Parents' tradition that the order and tradition of our organization creates a well-ordered unity centered on the true family and able with True Parents at the center. What does this mean? Right? We have this whole plan. And, becoming capable, sorry. I didn't practice this part, so I'm gonna read, so bear with me. Peace can be achieved individually, but true peace cannot be achieved without the united efforts of a global organization. For example, the Unification Church. Right? So this is what is key to connecting career to Providence, okay? Yes, we must become trained professionals who can capably solve issues in the world, but we also have to be able to work together, right? We're meant to work together as this global network of blessed children centered on God and True Parents. And so Ocean Providence was this huge plan to help guide our efforts in this unified manner. And so when you guys consider your future careers later on, please consider the problems of the world and how you can fit into a unified world toward achieving world peace and unification together as a movement with your brothers and sisters. Thank you guys.